Jake Morrison walked through the long metal hallways of Kepler Station with his chest puffed out and a big smile on his face. The space station was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen back home in Texas. It floated in space between 3 different planets, serving as the main training center for the Galactic Defense Academy. Students came here from all over the galaxy to learn how to fight and protect their worlds. At 22 years old, Jake was one of the best human students at the academy. He was tall and strong, with broad shoulders and thick arms that he had built up through years of working on his family's ranch. His brown hair was always messy, and his green eyes sparkled with confidence whenever he talked about his latest victory in the training rooms. The hallways were filled with all kinds of different creatures. Jake passed by a group of blue-skinned Centaurians who stood nearly 7 feet tall. Their forearms moved gracefully as they talked in their musical language. Next to them, a small group of Vex warriors clicked their claws together while discussing battle tactics. The Vex looked like giant insects, but fought with the discipline of professional soldiers. Jake nodded to a few of the alien students as he walked by. Most of them knew him by now. He had beaten many of them in sparring matches over the past 6 months. The humans were still new to this whole galactic community thing, but Jake was showing everyone that Earth's fighters were not to be taken lightly. He pushed open the heavy doors to Training Room 7 and stepped inside. The room was large and circular, with soft mats covering the floor and bright lights hanging from the ceiling. Along one wall, weapons of different shapes and sizes hung in neat rows. Some were from Earth, like swords and staffs, while others came from alien worlds and looked like nothing Jake had ever imagined. His instructor, Commander Zephyr, stood in the center of the room. The Altarian was an impressive sight, standing 8 feet tall with silver skin that seemed to shine under the lights. 4 eyes were arranged around his head, allowing him to see in all directions at once. He wore the dark blue uniform of a senior academy instructor, with medals and badges covering his chest. "Morrison," Commander Zephyr said in his deep voice that somehow came out in perfect English. "You are early today." Jake grinned and dropped his training bag near the wall. "Yes, sir, I wanted to get some extra practice in before the others arrived." The truth was that Jake loved being in the training rooms. Back on Earth, he had played football in high school and spent his free time learning mixed martial arts at a local gym. Fighting came naturally to him, and he enjoyed the challenge of facing opponents who were bigger, stronger, or faster than regular humans. Other students began filtering into the room. Ryan Cooper arrived first, another human from California who had become Jake's best friend at the academy. Ryan was shorter than Jake but quick on his feet, and he had a talent for using weapons that impressed even the alien instructors. "Hey, Jake," Ryan said as he set down his own bag. "Did you hear about the new transfer student?" Jake shook his head as he began stretching his arms and shoulders. "No, what about them?" "Another human," Ryan explained. "A girl from Oregon. She transferred in yesterday from the basic training center on Mars." More students entered the room. Matt Davis joined them, a stocky human from New York who specialized in defensive fighting. Behind him came 3 Korath warriors, their thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. The Korath were known throughout the galaxy as some of the fiercest fighters, and Jake had only managed to beat one of them once in a sparring match. Commander Zephyr called the class to attention. "Today we will focus on hand-to-hand combat techniques. You will work in pairs, practicing the moves we learned last week." Jake looked around the room, trying to decide which opponent would give him the best challenge. He had already sparred with most of the students multiple times. The Korath were always tough, but he had figured out their patterns. The Centaurians were fast, but not very strong. The Vex warriors were tricky, but they relied too much on their natural weapons instead of learning proper technique. "Before we begin," Commander Zephyr announced, "I want to introduce our newest student." The door opened, and a young woman walked in. She was human, probably around Jake's age, with long brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was average, height, and had a slim build that made her look almost fragile compared to the other fighters in the room. Her movements were quiet and careful, like she was trying not to draw attention to herself. "This is Lisa Kane," Commander Zephyr said. "She has completed basic training and will be joining our advanced combat classes." Lisa gave a small wave to the room but did not say anything. Her blue eyes looked around at all the different species of students, and Jake could see she was nervous. Most new students were intimidated when they first saw the variety of alien fighters they would be training with. Jake felt a little disappointed. He had been hoping for a new challenge, maybe a species he had never fought before. Another human would be easy. He had grown up wrestling with his older brothers and fighting in schoolyards. No human he had met at the academy could match his combination of size, strength, and experience. "Kane, you will partner with Morrison today," Commander Zephyr decided. "He can help you learn our training methods." Jake walked over to Lisa with a confident smile. "Don't worry," he said in a friendly voice. "I'll take it easy on you while you get used to how we do things here." Lisa looked up at him with those quiet blue eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate that." They moved to an open area of the mat, and Jake began showing Lisa the basic moves they had been practicing. She watched carefully and asked good questions, but he could tell she was holding back. Most new students were either too aggressive or too scared during their first sparring sessions. Lisa seemed to fall into the second category. As they worked through the exercises, Jake noticed that Lisa moved differently than he expected. She was graceful in a way that reminded him of dancers he had seen on television. Her steps were light and precise, and she never seemed to be off balance. But when it came time to actually practice the fighting techniques, she barely put any force behind her movements. "You can hit harder than that," Jake encouraged her after she threw a punch that would not have hurt a child. "The training gear will protect you, and I can handle it." Lisa nodded but did not change her approach. Her strikes remained soft and controlled, like she was afraid of accidentally hurting him. Around them, other pairs of students were engaged in more intense practice. Jake could hear the solid sounds of contact as the Korath practiced their grappling moves. The Centaurians were working on their four-armed fighting style, creating a blur of motion that was impressive to watch. Jake found himself getting a little frustrated. He had been looking forward to a real workout, but Lisa seemed more interested in going through the motions than actually learning to fight. He decided to increase the intensity a little, hoping to encourage her to match his energy. When he threw a controlled punch toward her shoulder, Lisa moved out of the way so smoothly that Jake almost lost his balance. It was like she had disappeared and reappeared 3 feet to the left. Jake blinked in surprise but figured it was just luck. The class continued for another hour, with Commander Zephyr moving around the room to offer advice and corrections. When he stopped to watch Jake and Lisa, Jake tried to show off a little, demonstrating some of the more advanced techniques he had learned. "Morrison is one of our most skilled human students," Commander Zephyr told Lisa. "You can learn much from training with him." Jake felt a surge of pride at the praise. He had worked hard to earn the respect of the alien instructors, and it felt good to be recognized. As the class ended and students began putting away their equipment, Jake felt like the session had been too easy. Lisa seemed nice enough, but she was clearly not ready for advanced training. He hoped Commander Zephyr would pair him with a more challenging opponent next time. Lisa packed her things quietly and headed for the door with the other students. She gave Jake a polite nod as she left. "Thanks for the practice," she said in that same soft voice. Jake watched her go, already thinking about tomorrow's training session. Maybe he would get a chance to spar with one of the new Korath students who had just arrived from their home world. Now that would be a real challenge. 3 days passed since Lisa Kane joined Jake's training group, and Jake was starting to feel like he was wasting his time. Every morning he would arrive at Training Room 7 hoping to face a real challenge, but Commander Zephyr kept pairing him with Lisa for partner exercises. Jake sat in the academy cafeteria with Ryan Cooper and Matt Davis, pushing his lunch around on his plate. The food was a mix of Earth cuisine and alien dishes that the kitchen staff prepared to keep all the different species happy. Today's special was something that looked like pasta, but tasted like chicken, mixed with purple vegetables from the Centaurian homeworld. "I don't understand why Commander Zephyr keeps putting me with the new girl," Jake complained to his friends. "Yesterday we spent 2 hours on basic defensive positions, and she moved like she was afraid to get her uniform." "Dirty." Ryan took a bite of his sandwich and shrugged. "Maybe he thinks you're good at teaching beginners. You did help that Vex student learn proper footwork last month." Matt looked across the cafeteria to where Lisa sat alone at a corner table, quietly, eating her meal while reading something on her tablet. She seems nice enough. Maybe she's just shy. Jake followed Matt's gaze and watched Lisa for a moment. She ate slowly and precisely, cutting her food into small pieces and chewing carefully. Everything about her seemed controlled and careful, like she was thinking about every movement before she made it. Nice doesn't win fights, Jake said, turning back to his friends. I came here to learn how to be the best fighter I can be, not to babysit someone who's afraid of her own shadow. The truth was that Jake had bigger ambitions than just getting through the academy. He had heard rumors that the best graduates sometimes got invited to join special military units that worked directly with the Galactic Council. These elite soldiers traveled to dangerous worlds and handled the most important missions. Jake wanted to be part of that group, and he knew he needed to prove himself against the toughest opponents the academy could offer. After lunch, Jake headed to Training Room 7 early, hoping to get some individual practice time before the afternoon class. He was surprised to find Lisa already there, working through a series of exercises by herself in one corner of the room. Jake stopped and watched her from the doorway. Lisa moved through what looked like a dance routine, her body flowing from one position to another in smooth, connected movements. Her arms curved gracefully through the air while her legs shifted in patterns that reminded Jake of water flowing around rocks. It was definitely not any fighting style Jake had ever seen. Back home in Texas, he had learned wrestling, boxing, and mixed martial arts. All of those styles focused on power, speed, and aggression. What Lisa was doing looked more like art than combat training. Jake decided to start his own warm-up routine on the other side of the room. He began with push-ups, cranking out 50 in quick succession to get his blood flowing. Then he moved to pull-ups on the exercise bars, followed by heavy bag work that filled the room with the solid thump of his fists hitting the leather. Lisa continued her flowing exercises without seeming to notice the noise Jake was making. She balanced on one foot while extending the other leg behind her, then slowly rotated into a different position that required incredible flexibility. Jake had to admit that she was more athletic than he had first thought, even if her training methods seemed useless for real fighting. Other students began arriving for the afternoon session. The 3 Korath warriors entered together, their heavy footsteps echoing on the metal floor. Behind them came a group of Zentorians, their blue skin gleaming under the training room lights. Commander Zephyr arrived exactly on time, as always. His 4 eyes took in the room, noting where each student was positioned and what they were doing. Today we will work on sparring combinations, he announced. You will rotate partners every 15 minutes to experience different fighting styles. Jake felt a surge of excitement. Finally, he would get a chance to face some real opponents instead of just working basic techniques with Lisa. The first rotation paired Jake with one of the Korath warriors, a massive creature named Thox, whose gray skin was covered in natural armor plates. Thox stood nearly 7 feet tall and probably weighed twice as much as Jake, but Jake had learned that size was not everything in a fight. They circled each other on the mat, both looking for openings. Thox moved forward with the confident aggression typical of his species, throwing powerful punches that could probably break bones if they connected. Jake used his speed and flexibility to stay out of range, then darted in to land quick strikes on Thox's less protected areas. After 5 minutes of intense sparring, Jake managed to get behind Thox and apply a chokehold that forced the big warrior to tap out. Several other students stopped their own matches to watch, and Jake heard a few impressed comments from the Zentorians. "Well done, Morrison," Commander Zephyr said, as he moved to the next pair. Jake felt the familiar rush of victory, as he and Thox bowed to each other respectfully. This was what he lived for, the challenge of facing a dangerous opponent and coming out on top through skill and determination. The next rotation put Jake against a Vex warrior, whose 4 arms created a complex pattern of attacks that was difficult to predict. Jake had fought Vex before and knew their weakness was that they relied too much on their natural advantages. After a few minutes of careful observation, he managed to time his counterattack perfectly and scored a clean victory. As the rotations continued, Jake found himself winning match after match. He beat 2 more Zentorians, another Korath, and even managed a draw against an experienced Altarian student who had been training at the academy for over a year. Between matches, Jake watched Lisa spar with her assigned partners. What he saw confirmed his opinion that she was not ready for advanced training. Against a young Zentorian, she spent most of the match moving backward and avoiding contact. When paired with a Vex warrior, she managed to stay out of reach of his claws but never launched any serious attacks of her own. "She's holding back too much," Ryan commented during a break between rotations. "If she doesn't start fighting for real, she's going to get hurt when she faces someone who won't take it easy on her." Matt nodded in agreement. "Maybe she's just not cut out for combat training. Some people are better suited for technical or support roles." Jake watched Lisa reset for another match, this time against a smaller Korath who was known for his quick grappling techniques. Once again, Lisa seemed to flow around her opponent's attacks without ever committing to a real counterattack. Match ended in a stalemate with neither fighter gaining a clear advantage. After the training session ended, Jake was feeling good about his performance. He had won 6 out of 7 matches and earned praise from Commander Zephyr for his improved technique against multiple opponent types. As he gathered his equipment, he overheard Commander Zephyr talking to his assistant, a young Altarian named Kess. "The human students continue to impress," Commander Zephyr was saying. "Morrison shows the aggressive adaptability that makes humans such effective fighters. His willingness to engage any opponent regardless of size or natural advantages is remarkable." "What about the female human?" Kess asked. "Kane seems hesitant to fully engage in combat." Commander Zephyr's 4 eyes turned toward Lisa, who was quietly packing her training gear. "She is different," he said thoughtfully. "Her movement patterns suggest extensive training, but she restrains herself. Perhaps she needs more time to adjust to our methods." Jake felt a mix of pride and frustration as he listened to the conversation. It was nice to hear his instructor praise his fighting spirit, but it bothered him that Lisa was dragging down the reputation of human fighters with her passive approach. Over the following days, Jake continued to excel in training while Lisa remained an enigma. She showed up on time, worked hard during exercises, and never complained about anything. But whenever it came time for actual sparring, she seemed content to play defense and avoid real confrontation. Jake's friends started making jokes about the situation. "Maybe she's afraid she'll break a nail," Ryan said one evening as they studied together in the dormitory common room. "Or maybe she's worried about messing up her hair," Matt added with a grin. Jake laughed along with his friends, but part of him felt bad about making fun of Lisa. She seemed like a nice person, and it was not her fault that she was not cut out for advanced combat training. Some people were just not natural fighters. The big change came when Commander Zephyr made an announcement that surprised everyone in the class. "Next week, we will hold a special exhibition match between our 2 human students," he said. "Several senior instructors have requested to observe how humans fight against their own species." Jake felt his heart start beating faster with excitement. Finally, he would get a chance to show what he could really do against an opponent who would not require him to hold back his full strength and speed. Lisa simply nodded when she heard the news, showing no emotion at all. Jake wondered if she understood what she was getting herself into. Fighting against aliens who had different strengths and weaknesses was one thing, but fighting against another human who knew all the same techniques she did would be completely different. The main training arena at Kepler Station had never been so crowded. Jake Morrison stood in the preparation room next to the arena, looking through the small window at the packed seats. Students from every species at the academy had come to watch the exhibition match between the 2 humans. Even instructors who usually stayed in their offices had found seats in the viewing area. Jake bounced on his toes and rolled his shoulders, feeling loose and ready. He wore the standard academy sparring uniform, a lightweight gray outfit that allowed for full movement while providing basic protection. His brown hair was damp with sweat from his warm-up routine, and his green eyes sparkled with excitement. This was exactly the kind of moment Jake had dreamed about when he first applied to the Galactic Defense Academy. A chance to show everyone what human fighters could do, with all the top instructors watching and taking notes. Word had spread through the station that several senior commanders from different species would be in attendance, including some who worked directly with the Galactic Council. Through the window, Jake could see Commander Zephyr talking with a group of alien instructors near the arena floor. The Altarian's four eyes moved constantly as he discussed something with his colleagues. Next to him stood Commander Vex Prime, the head combat instructor whose species had produced some of the galaxy's most feared warriors. Jake had never sparred with Commander Vex Prime directly, but he had heard stories about the instructor's legendary fighting skills. Ryan Cooper and Matt Davis appeared in the doorway of the preparation room. Both of Jake's friends wore big grins and looked excited about the upcoming match. "The whole academy is talking about this fight," Ryan said as he entered the room. "I heard some of the Korath students are taking bets on how long it will last." Matt laughed and clapped Jake on the shoulder. "What are they saying?" "Most of them think you'll win in under 2 minutes," Ryan replied. "The Zentaurians are betting on 1 minute or less." Jake felt a surge of confidence at hearing this. The alien students had watched him fight for months and knew what he was capable of. If they expected a quick victory, it was probably because they recognized the obvious difference in skill between him and Lisa. "Where's Lisa?" Jake asked, realizing he had not seen his opponent yet. "She's in the other prep room," Matt said. "I saw her about 10 minutes ago. She looked calm, like she was just getting ready for a regular training session." Jake nodded, impressed despite himself by Lisa's composure. Most people would be nervous before fighting in front of such a large audience, but Lisa had always seemed unflappable. It was probably the only advantage she would have in the upcoming match. A loud chime echoed through the preparation room, indicating that the match would begin in 5 minutes. Jake took a deep breath and did a few final stretches to make sure his muscles were ready. He had been training extra hard for the past week, working on combinations and techniques that would look impressive for the watching instructors. The door opened, and a young Altarian student entered. "Morrison, it is time," the student said, in accented English. Jake followed the student out of the preparation room and down a short hallway that led to the arena entrance. As they walked, he could hear the buzz of conversation from the packed viewing area. Multiple languages mixed together as students and instructors discussed the upcoming match. The arena itself was a large, circular space with soft mats covering the floor. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, ensuring that every movement would be clearly visible to the audience. Along the walls, screens displayed the Academy symbol and information about the two fighters. Jake stepped onto the mat and immediately felt the energy of the crowd. Cheers erupted from his friends and several other human students who had come to support him. A group of Korath warriors banged their armored fists together in approval, while the Zentaurians made musical sounds that Jake had learned meant encouragement. He walked to the center of the arena and looked around at all the faces watching him. This was his moment to shine, his chance to show everyone that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite fighters. Jake raised his hand and waved to the crowd, earning another round of cheers. The opposite entrance opened, and Lisa Kane stepped onto the mat. She wore the same gray sparring uniform as Jake, and her brown hair was pulled back in the same simple ponytail she always wore. Her face showed no emotion as she walked toward the center of the arena, her blue eyes focused straight ahead. Shar. Crowd quieted down as Lisa approached. Jake noticed that she moved with the same flowing grace he had observed during training, her steps light and precise. She seemed completely unaffected by the hundreds of eyes watching her every movement. "Commander?" Zephyr stepped onto the mat between the two fighters. His silver skin gleamed under the bright lights as he addressed the audience in his powerful voice. "Today, we observe a demonstration match between two human students," he announced. "This exhibition will show us how Earth's fighters perform against opponents of their own species. The rules are standard Academy sparring protocol. No weapons, no techniques intended to cause permanent injury. The match ends with submission or instructor intervention." Jake and Lisa walked toward each other and met in the center of the mat. Up close, Jake could see that Lisa looked exactly as calm as she had during every training session. Her breathing was steady and her posture relaxed, like she was about to practice basic forms rather than fight in front of the entire academy. "Good luck," Jake said with a confident smile, extending his hand for the traditional pre-match handshake. Lisa took his hand briefly, her grip firm but not aggressive. "Thank you," she replied in her usual soft voice. Commander Zephyr stepped back to the edge of the mat. "Fighters ready," he called out. Jake dropped into his preferred fighting stance, weight balanced on the balls of his feet with his hands raised. In a classic boxer's guard, Lisa simply stood upright with her arms at her sides, looking more like she was waiting for instructions than preparing to fight. The arena fell completely silent. Jake could feel his heart beating fast with anticipation. This was it, his chance to prove himself in front of everyone who mattered. "Begin," Commander Zephyr announced. Jake immediately moved forward, using his size and reach advantage to press the attack. He had decided to end the match quickly, with an impressive display of speed and power. A few solid combinations would show the watching instructors that humans could fight with both technique and aggression. He threw a quick left jab toward Lisa's shoulder, not intending to hurt her, but wanting to establish his range and timing. Lisa moved slightly to one side and Jake's punch passed harmlessly through empty air. He followed up with a right cross aimed at her midsection, putting more power behind the strike. Again, Lisa was not where Jake expected her to be. She had shifted backward just enough that his punch fell short, her movement so smooth that it looked effortless. Jake pressed forward, throwing a combination of punches that should have forced Lisa to defend herself aggressively. Instead, Lisa seemed to flow around his attacks like water around a stone. She did not block or parry his punches in any conventional way. Instead, she simply was not there when his fists arrived. Jake found himself punching air while Lisa moved in patterns that reminded him of those strange exercises she had been doing, alone in the training room. The crowd began murmuring as they watched the unusual exchange. Jake could hear comments in different alien languages, though he could not understand what they were saying. He increased his pace, throwing faster combinations and trying to cut off Lisa's movement with better angles. Lisa continued her evasive dance, never seeming hurried or desperate. Occasionally she would move close enough to Jake that he thought he had trapped her, but then she would slip away again before he could land a solid hit. Her movements were hypnotic to watch, each step flowing naturally into the next like a choreographed performance. Jake began to feel frustrated. He was used to opponents who would meet his aggression with their own attacks, giving him opportunities to counter and demonstrate his skills. Lisa's purely defensive approach was making him look like he was fighting a ghost. He decided to try grappling, using his strength and wrestling background to force a more direct confrontation. Jake lunged forward and attempted to grab Lisa's arms, planning to use his size advantage to control the match. For the first time since the fight began, Lisa moved toward Jake instead of away from him. As he reached for her, she stepped inside his grab and placed one hand lightly on his chest. Jake felt her touch but dismissed it as ineffective. He continued his attempt to wrap her up in a wrestling hold. Lisa's other hand touched Jake's extended arm just above the elbow, her fingers pressing gently against what felt like pressure points. Jake ignored the light contact and tried to complete his grappling move, but something felt wrong. His arm was not responding the way it should, and his grip felt weak. Before Jake could figure out what was happening, Lisa had stepped away again, leaving him grasping at nothing. He looked down at his arm in confusion, then back at Lisa, who stood a few feet away with the same calm expression she always wore. The crowd was now completely silent, watching the strange match with intense focus. Jake could see alien instructors leaning forward in their seats, studying Lisa's movement patterns with obvious interest. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead and stared at Lisa Kane across the mat. 10 minutes had passed since the match began, and he had not landed a single meaningful hit. His breathing was heavy, and his muscles were starting to feel tired from throwing so many punches and kicks that connected with nothing but air. The crowd in the arena had grown completely silent, watching with fascination as the unusual fight continued. Jake could see Commander Zephyr and the other instructors leaning forward in their seats, their attention focused entirely on Lisa's movements. Even the betting Korath warriors had stopped making noise and were studying the match with serious expressions. Lisa stood in the center of the mat, looking exactly as fresh as when the fight had started. Her breathing was calm and steady. Her posture relaxed, and her blue eyes remained focused on Jake with that same quiet intensity she always showed. It was like she had been taking a peaceful walk instead of fighting for her life against a trained opponent. Jake felt a growing sense of frustration and confusion. This was not how fights were supposed to go. In all his years of training and competition, he had never faced an opponent who could avoid his attacks so completely. Lisa was not faster than him or stronger than him, but somehow she was always exactly where she needed to be to stay safe. He decided to change his strategy. Instead of trying to overwhelm Lisa with power and aggression, he would be more careful and methodical. Jake began moving in a slow circle around her, looking for patterns in her movement and weaknesses in her defense. Lisa turned to keep facing him, but made no aggressive moves of her own. She seemed content to let Jake dictate the pace and style of the fight, responding to his attacks without ever initiating her own. Her hands remained at her sides, open and relaxed, showing no signs of preparing to strike. Jake feinted a punch toward Lisa's head, then quickly changed direction to aim a kick at her legs. Lisa flowed away from both attacks with that same graceful movement he had been seeing all match. But this time, Jake noticed something different. As she avoided his kick, Lisa's hand briefly touched his extended leg, her fingers pressing against a spot just above his knee. The touch was so light that Jake barely felt it, and he dismissed it as accidental contact. He continued his attack, throwing a series of punches designed to force Lisa into a corner, where she would have less room to move around. Lisa did not try to avoid being cornered. Instead, she allowed Jake to drive her backward toward the edge of the mat, her movement becoming smaller and more controlled. Jake felt a surge of excitement, thinking he finally had her trapped where his size and strength would give him a decisive advantage. He launched his most powerful combination yet, putting all his weight behind a right cross that should have ended the fight immediately. Lisa was only 3 feet away with nowhere to run, and Jake was certain this punch would connect. What happened next took place so quickly that most of the watching audience missed the details. Lisa did not try to move away from Jake's punch. Instead, she stepped forward into his attack, moving closer to him rather than farther away. As Jake's fist flew toward her head, Lisa's body seemed to fold around the punch like water around a rock. Her torso twisted and bent in a way that allowed Jake's most powerful strike to pass harmlessly over her shoulder. At the same time, both of her hands moved to touch different points along Jake's extended arm. Jake felt her fingers press against his wrist, elbow, and shoulder in quick succession. The touches were precise and purposeful, not random contact, but deliberate actions performed with perfect timing. For a split second, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation running up his arm, like tiny electric shocks moving through his muscles. Then Lisa completed her counterattack. Using Jake's own forward momentum against him, she applied a technique that looked almost gentle from the outside. Her hands guided his extended arm into a position that put tremendous pressure on his joints and muscles, while her body movement created a lever that multiplied the force. Jake's confident expression changed to confusion, then shock, then pain, as he realized what was happening. His arm, which had been reaching out to deliver his strongest punch, was now twisted in a direction it was never meant to go. The pressure Lisa was applying felt like it was coming from multiple directions at once, targeting every weak point in his arm structure. He tried to pull back or change his position, but Lisa's technique had trapped him completely. Every movement he made only increased the pressure on his joints. Jake could feel his bones and muscles being stressed beyond their limits, and a sharp pain shot through his entire arm. The crack of Jake's arm breaking echoed through the silent arena like a gunshot. The sound was so clear and sudden that several students in the audience gasped out loud. Jake dropped to one knee, his face twisted in pain and disbelief as he stared at his arm hanging at an unnatural angle. Lisa immediately released her hold and stepped back, her hands returning to her sides. Her expression showed no satisfaction or cruelty, just the same calm focus she had maintained throughout the entire match. She looked like a craftsman who had just completed a difficult but routine task. Jake knelt on the mat, cradling his broken arm against his chest. The pain was intense, but even stronger was his shock at what had just happened. One moment he had been delivering his most powerful attack, confident of victory, and the next moment he was defeated and injured by an opponent he had completely underestimated. Commander Zephyr rushed onto the mat along with the medical team that was always standing by during sparring matches. The medics were a mixed group of humans and aliens trained in treating injuries from multiple species. They quickly surrounded Jake and began examining his arm with professional efficiency. Clean fracture of the radius and ulna, one of the human medics announced. No displacement. The healing chambers will have him back to full strength in 3 days. Jake barely heard the medical assessment. He was still staring at Lisa, trying to understand how she had done what she did. The technique she had used was unlike anything he had ever seen or experienced. It was not the brute force approach he was familiar with, but something far more sophisticated and precise. The arena remained completely silent as the medics worked. Jake could see hundreds of eyes watching him, but for the first time since arriving at the academy, the attention did not feel good. Instead of being admired for his fighting skills, he was being studied like a specimen in a laboratory. Lisa stood quietly nearby while the medics stabilized Jake's arm. When Commander Zephyr approached her, she gave a respectful bow, but said nothing. Her breathing was still calm and steady, as if breaking someone's arm in front of the entire academy was a normal part of her day. "Kane," Commander Zephyr said in his deep voice, "explain the technique you just used." Lisa looked up at the tall Altarian instructor with her usual quiet expression. "It is called flowing water breaks the stone," she said simply. "It uses the opponent's force against them while targeting structural weak points." Commander Zephyr's 4 eyes studied Lisa with obvious interest. "This is not a technique taught in our standard combat curriculum. Where did you learn it?" "My family has practiced traditional martial arts for many generations," Lisa replied. "I have been training since I was old enough to walk." Jake listened to this conversation while the medics fitted a temporary brace on his arm. Traditional martial arts. That explained the flowing movements and the strange exercises he had seen Lisa practicing alone. She had not been learning to fight at the academy. She had already known how to fight before she arrived. Around the arena, Jake could see alien instructors talking among themselves in excited voices. The Korath warriors were pointing at Lisa and discussing something in their growling language. The Zentorians were making musical sounds that Jake recognized as expressions of deep respect. Commander Vex Prime, the head combat instructor, stood up from his seat and walked down to the arena floor. The insect-like alien moved with the deadly grace that had made his species famous throughout the galaxy as warriors. When he reached Lisa, he performed a formal bow that Jake had never seen him give to any student. "Impressive," Commander Vex Prime said in his clicking voice. "Your technique shows understanding of combat principles that most students never learn. You were holding back in your previous sparring sessions." Lisa nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. I was trying to learn your methods and did not want to accidentally injure my training partners." Jake felt a cold realization wash over him. Lisa had been holding back during all those training sessions he had watched. The passive defense and reluctance to engage were not signs of weakness or fear. She had been restraining herself to avoid hurting the other students. The medics finished with Jake's arm and helped him to his feet. As they escorted him toward the medical bay, he looked back at Lisa one more time. She was surrounded by instructors who were asking questions about her background and training methods. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Defense Academy, Jake Morrison felt truly humbled. He had thought he understood what it meant to be a fighter, but Lisa had just shown him that there were levels of skill and knowledge he had never imagined. The crowd began to disperse as Jake left the arena, but he could hear continued conversations about what they had witnessed. Jake Morrison sat on the edge of his bed in the medical bay, staring at his arm that was now encased in a clear healing tube. The advanced medical technology of the Galactic Defense Academy was impressive to watch. He could see the broken bones in his arm slowly knitting back together as microscopic repair machines worked to restore the damaged tissue. The doctors had told him the healing process would take 3 days, which was much faster than the months it would have taken on Earth. But Jake knew that healing his pride would take much longer than healing his bones. 2 days had passed since the exhibition match, and Jake had spent most of that time thinking about what had happened. He replayed the fight in his mind over and over, trying to understand how he had gone from feeling completely confident to lying on the mat with a broken arm in just a few seconds. Ryan Cooper and Matt Davis had visited him several times, bringing updates from their classes and trying to cheer him up. But Jake could tell that his friends were also confused by what they had witnessed. None of them had expected Lisa to be capable of what she had done. "The whole academy is talking about it," Ryan had said during his visit yesterday. "Some of the alien students are calling her technique magic, but the instructors keep saying it was pure skill." Jake heard footsteps in the hallway outside the medical bay and looked up to see Lisa Kane standing in the doorway. She carried a small bag and wore the same quiet expression she always had. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "May I come in?" Lisa asked softly. Jake nodded, suddenly feeling nervous in a way he had never experienced around Lisa before. She entered the room and sat in the chair next to his bed, setting her bag on the floor. "I brought your missed assignments from the classes you have been absent from," Lisa said, pulling several tablets and datapads from her bag. "I also took notes during the lectures in case you wanted to review them." Jake accepted the study materials with his good hand, surprised by Lisa's thoughtfulness. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to do that." Lisa was quiet for a moment, studying Jake's face with those calm blue eyes. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally. "I did not intend for the match to end the way it did." Jake looked down at his healing arm, then back at Lisa. "You broke my arm in front of the entire academy. How exactly did you not intend for that to happen?" "I was trying to avoid seriously injuring you," Lisa explained. "When you threw that final punch, your aggression and momentum left me with very few options. I could have targeted other areas that would have caused more permanent damage." Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what Lisa was saying. The broken arm had not been the worst thing she could have done to him. It had actually been the gentlest option available to her at that moment. "I don't understand," Jake said. "Where did you learn to fight like that? What you did was nothing like anything they teach here at the academy." Lisa settled back in her chair, and for the first time since Jake had known her, she seemed willing to talk about herself. "My family comes from a long line of martial artists," she began. "My great-grandmother learned from masters in China before immigrating to America. She passed the knowledge to my grandmother, who taught my mother, who taught me." Jake listened carefully as Lisa continued her explanation. "The style I practice is very old, developed over hundreds of years by people who needed to defend themselves against larger, stronger opponents. It focuses on precision rather than power, timing rather than speed." "But why didn't you show any of this during our training sessions?" Jake asked. "You always seemed so passive and afraid to really fight." Lisa looked down at her hands, which were folded calmly in her lap. "Because I was taught that the greatest strength is knowing when, not to use your full power. My instructors always told me that a true martial artist seeks to avoid fighting, and when fighting becomes necessary, to end it as quickly and safely as possible." Jake began to understand something that had confused him about Lisa's behavior. "You were holding back because you didn't want to hurt anyone." "Yes," Lisa confirmed. "During our sparring sessions, I was learning about different fighting styles and trying to adapt to the academy's methods. I wanted to see how much I could learn without revealing my full capabilities. And you were giving me chances to realize what you could do," Jake said, remembering all the times Lisa had lightly touched his arm or leg during their practice matches. Lisa nodded. "I was hoping you would notice the pressure points I was touching, and understand that I was trying to show you something. Many of the alien instructors recognized what I was doing, but I think human fighters are trained differently," Jake thought about this for a moment. It was true that his training had always focused on overwhelming opponents with strength and aggression. The idea of using an opponent's force against them was completely foreign to his experience. "So during the exhibition match, when I kept attacking harder and harder," Jake began, "you left me no choice but to respond with a decisive technique," Lisa finished. "I tried to redirect your attacks and show you that force was not the answer, but you continued to escalate. By the time you threw that final punch, stopping you gently was no longer possible." Jake leaned back against his pillow and stared at the ceiling. Everything about the match made sense now. Lisa had not been trying to defeat him or show off her skills. She had been trying to teach him something, and when he failed to learn the lesson, she had been forced to end the fight in the only way available. "I feel like an idiot," Jake said finally. "I spent weeks thinking you were weak and needed my protection when really you could have defeated me any time you wanted." Lisa's expression softened slightly. "You are not an idiot, Jake. You are a skilled fighter who was trained in a different tradition. Your approach works well against many opponents, especially those who try to match your aggression with their own." "But not against you," Jake said. "Not against anyone who has learned to use softness to overcome hardness," Lisa agreed. "My style is specifically designed to defeat fighters who rely on strength and direct attacks." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes while Jake processed everything Lisa had told him. Finally, he looked at her again with new respect in his eyes. "Would you be willing to teach me?" he asked. "I mean, I know I can't learn everything you know, but maybe you could show me some of the basics." Lisa smiled for the first time since Jake had known her. It was a small, gentle smile, but it transformed her entire face. "I would be honored to share what I know with you," she said. "But you should understand that learning my family's methods requires patience and humility. It is not about becoming stronger or faster. It is about becoming wiser." Jake nodded eagerly. "I think I need to learn some wisdom. What happened in that match showed me that I don't know as much about fighting as I thought I did." Over the following weeks, as Jake's arm healed and he returned to regular training, he began working with Lisa during their free time. She taught him basic exercises that looked simple, but required incredible precision and control. Jake discovered that learning to move like Lisa was much harder than learning to punch like a boxer. The other students at the academy began to notice the change in Jake's approach to training. He was less aggressive during sparring matches and more focused on understanding his opponents rather than overwhelming them. His win rate actually decreased at first, but the quality of his technique improved dramatically. Commander Zephyr and the other instructors watched this development with great interest. During one training session, Commander Zephyr approached Jake and Lisa as they worked together on a complex defensive sequence. "The integration of different human fighting philosophies is fascinating to observe," the Altarian said. "Morrison, your willingness to learn from defeat shows wisdom. Kane, your patience in teaching shows true mastery." Lisa bowed respectfully to the instructor. "We are both learning from each other, sir. Jake is teaching me about aggression and direct tactics, while I share what I know about redirection and precision." Commander Zephyr's four eyes studied both students carefully. "This partnership may represent something important for human combat development. Most species develop a single fighting tradition, but humans seem capable of combining multiple approaches." As the months passed, Jake and Lisa became known throughout the academy as an unusual but effective team. They complemented each other perfectly during group exercises, with Jake providing direct pressure while Lisa created opportunities through positioning and timing. Their friendship, which had begun with Jake's humbling defeat, became one of the strongest bonds at the academy. Jake learned to appreciate qualities he had never valued before, like patience, precision, and the wisdom to avoid unnecessary conflict. Lisa gained confidence in showing her abilities and learned that strength could be expressed in many different ways. When graduation day arrived, both Jake and Lisa received honors for their achievements. Jake was recognized for his leadership and tactical skills, while Lisa received special commendation for her innovative integration of traditional martial arts with modern military training. Commander Zephyr delivered a speech to the graduating class that mentioned their partnership specifically. "The human students Morrison and Kane have demonstrated something unique among the species we train here," he said.